Coming up on Tech News Weekly, Abrar Al-Heeti joins me for the full show. We start out by talking about where self-driving is taking us. Then we talk about Sonos and its work on a set-top box before we discuss the Beatles winning a Grammy for their AI-assisted song and how things are going for developers of VR games. All of that coming up next on Tech News Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 373, with Abrar Al-Heeti and me, Mikah Sargent, recorded Thursday, February 6th, 2025. AI wins a Grammy. Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. I am your host, Mikah Sargent, and I am joined today, because it is the first Thursday of the month, by CNET's own Abrar Al-Heeti. Welcome back, Abrar.
Thank you so much for having me. Good to be back. Month 2. Here we go.
Yes, we love it. We love it. We are in February. I like I don't know if you did it on purpose, but the delightful pinks that you're wearing.
I didn't do it on purpose, but I love that you made that connection. I never would have. So let's pretend that, yes, that's exactly my intention. I'm very on brand here. Yeah.
Very intentional. Very good.
Totally.
We are living. We are loving. Loving February. Okay. So anyway, I'm excited because today Abrar has agreed to join me for the entirety of the show. We'll both be bringing 2 stories of the week to the table. And Abrar, you were the person who introduced me to in an actual I've done this thing way of being in a self-driving car. So I'm really excited to hear about your first story of the week.
Yes, I am become quite obsessed with self-driving cars lately, just because there's so much happening in this space right now. And what I wanted to talk about was how Uber is expanding its partnership with Waymo, meaning that in Austin, sometime soon, we don't know exactly when, people in Austin will be able to use the Uber app to summon a Waymo robo-taxi. So instead of just getting your standard Uber ride with a human driver, you could have a self-driving ride if you just want to control the music and be alone and, enjoy that serenity. This is interesting to me because of the relationship between Uber and Waymo, right? So they've had a contentious start to their relationship. You might remember back in about 2016 when a Google engineer had left that company, but this is back before Waymo was spun off from Google's parent company, Alphabet. This engineer had left and went to Uber and then was later convicted of stealing Google's trade secrets.
Awkward.
So that was quite dramatic. And since then, Uber and Waymo seem to be getting along. But I also saw this really interesting New York Times story, which I think does a really good job of characterizing this relationship where, yes, Uber and Waymo are getting along, but kind of because they have to right now. Because, if you're Uber, you're thinking, we want to maintain our business. We tried our own self-driving effort. It didn't really work. We sold it off. We're now just focused on our bread and butter, human-driven rides. But self-driving is a thing that's not quite going away yet. Yes, it's expensive. Yes, it's very difficult to develop this technology, but people are still doing it. And by people, I mean Waymo and Zoox and RAP Cruise. And then there are a few startups too that are working on this, companies like AV Ride and May Mobility. But, the point being, Uber is trying to figure out and Lyft is trying to figure out, how do we stay relevant as self-driving continues to take off? And now Waymo is probably thinking, okay, we have our own Waymo One app. If you're hailing a ride in San Francisco or in LA or even in Phoenix, you can use the Waymo One app to get a ride. But also if you're in Phoenix and soon in Austin and soon in Atlanta, you can also use the Uber app. So they're trying to figure out, how can each company trying to figure out how can we stay relevant and tap into more riders. The biggest thing for me is when you're hailing a ride with the Waymo One app, oftentimes for me in San Francisco, it is a little bit more expensive to get a Waymo ride than it is to just call an Uber. I think that'll change as there are more vehicles and as, the technology develops and as time goes on. But right now it's a little bit more expensive. And then it sounds like such a minor step, but is the added step of downloading a new app. So if you don't have the Waymo One app, you might be like, well, I already have the Uber app. Let me just call an Uber. But if you're in Austin, or if you're in Phoenix, or soon to be also in Atlanta, then you already have the Uber app on your phone. So if you're opening it up and you think, well, I could just get an Uber X, but let me scroll down and actually just get a Waymo instead, and it can be fun, and I can try this out and see what everyone's talking about. So I think that idea of having it all within one app that people already use, and then the other critical piece is Uber says that prices for a Waymo will be the same price as getting a standard human-driven vehicle, like an Uber X, for example. So that is a very critical point, because you won't be paying more for this novelty. You may or may not get matched with it if you request it. But if you do, then you're paying the same price and you get this brand new experience that you can go and tell all your friends about. So I'm just really curious how this relationship will develop. There are very few key players at this point, and I think everyone has to kind of buddy up right now and get through the storm and see who makes it out alive. But I don't know. I would love to know your thoughts about if you had that option of, it's already in the Uber app, wherever you are, and it costs the same price. Do you think you'd let your curiosity get the best of you and just give it a go? Would you be more likely to?
Yeah. So I will have a question for you at the end. I will say, yes. I absolutely, there's one actual regret that I had. Well, if there's one sort of a silly regret involved with moving away from San Francisco, that I did not, before I left, take the time to head in and use the Waymo service, because I did get access via the app and I didn't get the chance to. And it was so funny. It's weird how these things kind of cross cultural groups and boundaries. I was watching a little clip from a show where there are these two drag queens who watch Netflix shows and talk about them. And one of the drag queens, just as they were having this conversation about this Netflix show, one of them brought up, I just got invited via the Waymo to get to do the self-drive. And it's just like, that's so funny that so many of us from these different, walks of life are all find this thing kind of cool. Yeah. And I think it's cool. And so in that way, I absolutely want to try it. I don't know how far away we are from this being a regular and consistent thing, but I just point blank, I think it's cool. Yeah. But I did have the question for you. Yes. Because I'm an anxious person, and I like an example would be that when Apple Pay first came out, I think it took me a very, very long time. I know it took me a very, very long time to use tap to pay in a store, because I was worried I'd end up being that person who was holding up the line because something went wrong, and then using it for a while, and then one time something went wrong, and so then it took me longer to do it again because of it going wrong. Right. I see the blowback when it comes to these self-driving cars, and the times when something goes wrong. And also the one that really stuck out to me was when there was a person was in a self-driving car, and there was a traffic officer who was trying to say, do this or don't do this. And the car obviously was not listening, and the officer made eye contact with the person in the vehicle who's just riding, asking them like, what in the world, why are you? And the person that's in the car is like, I don't know what, and I was just thinking about how if I was there, I would have melted into a puddle and just like disappeared. Yeah. Do you have those am I giving you those anxieties? No. Do you have those anxieties? Like, how do you, is your curiosity and enthusiasm stronger maybe than that anxiety? And maybe how often are you, making use of this service? And has it been mostly the case that it's been a fine thing that works? I think you've really got it right when it comes to my curiosity being overshadowing any anxieties I have. The first time I got on a Waymo, it was for a video. And so I was really excited to be able to kind of demonstrate that experience in real time. And so I think I was running off adrenaline. And so I get in the car, and then you see the wheel turning by itself, and it's really weird. And
And then truly within, I think, 20 to 30 seconds, you're like, oh, this feels so normal. And I think the real test was we got to a 4-way stop, and the fact that the car obviously had to know what it was doing. It wouldn't have gotten to that point if it didn't know how to handle a 4-way stop, but still you're in it for the first time, and it felt so seamless and so smooth. And the thing that helps with anxiety is that there are customer support buttons across, in the front seat and in the back seat. So you can also pull over at any time, call someone, but there are always, these freak incidents, right? And I don't know if you also saw the video where I think it was in LA where somebody was stuck in a Waymo that was just going in circles and just stopping, and he was trying to get to the airport. So of course there are things that happen. These are not, foolproof technologies, but I think I am quite impressed with how it handles. I mean, I think San Francisco is such a good test of this because you have pedestrians who may or may not follow, when they're supposed to walk or when they're not supposed to walk. And Waymos do a really impressive job of being aggressive drivers, but also careful drivers, which is a very fine line to walk. And so they're very, they're very assertive on roads, but the second they see any semblance of motion, they're going to stop. So yeah, I think that really helps me feel better, is that I've had pretty positive experiences in terms of how often I've used this. I think it's probably no more than twice a month at most. I, tend to rely on public transportation more than anything. And then when I am in the city, the thing is, I live in Oakland, but I work in San Francisco. I think if Waymo was able to cross the Bay Bridge and go from Oakland to San Francisco, I would take it all the time. I don't think I'd ever take an Uber, to be honest. I love the serenity of having space to myself. I love not being asked personal questions for no reason by curious drivers who probably mean well, but sometimes it's a little too much. But I think we have to kind of wait for Waymo to expand and come over to this side of the bay.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else you want to say about that before we take a break?
I think that's it. I think, it'll just, the only other thing is in Austin, it'll be interesting because Elon Musk also says that self-driving Teslas will be coming to Austin in June. So we'll see if that happens, and we'll see what that all looks like in the coming months.
Yeah, I would say write that down on your calendars so we can fact check when it comes along. But at the same time,
take it with a pinch of salt.
Anyway, let's take a quick break before we come back with my first story of the week. I want to tell you about Delete Me, who is bringing you this episode of Tech News Weekly. If you've ever searched for your name online, you probably didn't like how much of your personal information was available. I certainly didn't. And maintaining privacy isn't just a personal concern. When you think about it, it's really a family affair. With Delete Me's family plans, you can ensure that everyone in the family feels safe online. Delete Me helps reduce risk from identity theft, cybersecurity threats, harassment, and more. See, you could look up my information and you would find out stuff about me, but given my background, I'm going to be careful about what is being sent to me and maybe, filter out the stuff that is attempting to get in touch and use that in a negative way. But when you think about how, if they could find out who my family is and they could reach out to my uncle or my grandpa and call my grandpa and say, hey, it's Mikah and I am in jail and I need bail. Can you send a check to this address? Those kinds of things where you are suddenly being faced with this frightening situation and you are, moving quickly and not thinking because it's bypassing that kind of critical thinking aspect. Those are the things that happen when your information and your family's information can be connected to one another online. So having that information removed is super important. And that's what Delete Me does. The experts will find and remove your information from hundreds of data brokers. You can assign a unique data sheet to each family member that's tailored to them. And with easy-to-use controls, account owners can manage privacy settings for the whole family. Delete Me will continue to scan and remove your information regularly, including addresses, photos, emails, relatives, phone numbers, social media, property value, and more. And for those of you who are online, they would say extremely online, who want to, make sure that your work or your, if you're a streamer or something like that, you may be going, oh no, I don't want them to get rid of my information because I want people to be able to find me. understand that I have used Delete Me. And what Delete Me does is it goes after that private information. And you can still search my name and find the work that I do. But now it's much more difficult to search my name and find out different addresses that I've lived at and who my family members are and those kinds of things. That's what Delete Me goes in and removes. And that's what it helped to do for me. So protect yourself and reclaim your privacy by going to joindeleteme.com/twit and using the code TWIT TWIT. That's joindeleteme.com/twit with the code TWIT, TWIT, for 20% off. And we thank Delete Me for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. All right, we are back from the break, and that means it is time for my story of the week. I wanted to talk about Sonos because I know Sonos is a very popular company and device maker among listeners of the show. And Sonos has had a bit of a rough year this past year, given its introduction of a new Sonos app that people just flat out did not like. And on top of that, honestly, shame on the company, it did not have the accessibility tools in place that the former version of the app did. So many Sonos customers who relied on those accessibility features were unable entirely to use their Sonos devices that up to that point they were able to use. It was a mess. And that resulted in the shift of the leadership at the company. There's now a new interim CEO, Tom Conrad, and Conrad is kind of looking at how to move things forward. Well, one of those things that the company is reportedly working on, according to this piece from The Verge, is a new streaming box. And that is an interesting introduction from Sonos, who up to this point has mostly focused on obviously audio and has created different audio devices, be it speakers or sound bars or headphones. A streaming box obviously puts you into a new category where you are now in charge of what is visually displaying on a television or some other, device for displaying content. And this device, which is codenamed Pinewood, is not just your traditional streaming media box like an Apple TV or an Amazon Fire TV, in that Sonos is reportedly working on an HDMI switch. So what that means is you would plug in multiple HDMI devices. So a television, for example, on one end, but then on the other end, you could have a PlayStation, an Xbox, and perhaps even another set-top box. And then your television, again, on the other end, and be able to switch between those, where Sonos serves as the in-between for all of them. And the reason why the company is doing this is because up to this point, there have been loads of different inconsistencies that exist in firmware and software for modern smart televisions that have resulted in issues over time where somebody buys a Sonos soundbar, for example, and it doesn't work as one would expect with their television. So you can imagine that you plug it in and you're watching a show and then the audio falls out of sync. That's frustrating. It could be that the audio is distorted and you're trying to go in and make changes and make sure that the codec is set right here and that this is set up, and you're using HDMI CEC, but it needs to be HDMI CEC plus, and you've got to plug it into the ARC channel. I mean, there's a lot that's involved and a lot of troubleshooting that is done, and a lot of support calls that cost money. And so Sonos says, how can we address this problem? Well, let's be in charge of the I/O, the input output. Let's be the middleman, essentially, that will make sure that, we're handling all of that stuff. So then there's not a concern. And what that allows Sonos to do is something that people have wanted for a long time, which is to have like a full-featured streaming sound setup where you can have this box and you can have the Sonos speakers that you already have in different places in your house, and the audio can be output to them, and you can do something like surround sound, for example. So you can use two of your Sonos speakers to serve as, your left and right channel, and your up, left and right, which is for Dolby Atmos, for example. And I think the big surprise here is that it's reportedly going to cost between $200 and $400, which is, it used to be the Apple TV was the one that you would go, I know it's expensive, but I promise you it's worth it. This is why it's easy. It's this, it's that. And hearing $200 to $400 for a set-top box that's, according to Chris Welch of The Verge, a flattened black square that's slightly thicker than a deck of trading cards. That's an interesting thing. But if there's anything I know about a Sonos customer, it's that they don't mind spending money on Sonos devices. Those things are expensive by default. And so I think that it doesn't surprise me that people might still be into this. Now, the other thing that I'll say about it is that one thing that could potentially set this device apart, although there are many a set-top box of yesteryear that have said that they were going to do this. Although Sonos says, no, but trust us, we actually are going to make this the central feature of this set-top box is being able to search for content across streaming services and be able to find something regardless of where it is. I remain skeptical because we've seen so many different companies try to do that. Apple, who's got deep pockets and lots of relationships with lots of different companies, has struggled to get some. For example, I can't do a search in the basic search of the Apple TV and have it look for Netflix content. And when it comes to Prime Video content, you can sort of search for it, but it doesn't show up in different parts of the app that other things do. And the ability to set a user is supposed to sync between the basic user that you have on the device itself. And then if you launch an app, it's supposed to go to that user automatically, and it never does. These integrations very rarely work. So if Sonos was able to pull that off somehow, I would be shocked. But I could see it being something that Sonos could do simply because there's no Sonos streaming service. So they're not a direct competitor. So they're really only adding value to those streaming platforms by making it a little bit more searchable. So I guess what I'd love to talk to you about first, Abrar, is what's your streaming setup look like? Yeah. And are you a soundbar girly? Do you, what's it look like for you?
I was thinking about this all as you were talking. I was like, my setup is so primitive. I've got my Sony Smart TV, Google powered, and that's whatever's baked in is what I use. I've got my apps on there and I just click into them. I think as far as I get is, I think it does a decent job of, if I search for a title, I think 85% of the time it will find where that is streaming. Sometimes it misses and doesn't necessarily point me to the right streaming service. And then I got to go tap in, which is, oh, God forbid I, click two buttons, but
that's how it feels though.
Right. It should be easier. There's just so much. And I think what ends up being easier most of the time is literally just, doing a Google search beforehand to see where something is streaming. Cause sometimes you're not going to be able to, find it with these smart TVs. But my brother is really into sound bars and I have not tapped into that yet. And so I feel like I should. I think living in an apartment, you're like, how much sound can I get away with though?
Yes, 100%.
So like for him, it's like he doesn't have to worry about that. But I'm like, I think I'd have to figure out how to best tap into that without getting noise complaints. But someday I hope I do become a soundbar girly. But I don't have a streaming box or anything. So I guess I've saved a lot of money after hearing about this one, but I think it's fascinating that something like this is so needed because everything's so fragmented, right? You kind of just need something to bring it all together and make people's lives easier. But how about you? What's your setup look like?
So I want to triple agree on the fact that living in an apartment, as I did in California, meant needing to be very mindful of the sound.
Yeah.
And so we had things in place to make sure that, I'll explain my setup in a second, but there was a setting to basically reduce bass.
Yes.
And so that was one thing that we did. And then you never turned it up past a certain point.
Yeah.
And that was regular. So yeah, it's kind of hard to go all in on the setup. Now that we're in Portland, we are in a home that is not attached to anyone else.
Go wild.
And
yes.
So I turned that, reduced bass thing off, which has been nice. And then also, if we want to get loud watching a movie, we can.
Yeah.
So for me, we have an Apple TV, the latest model, and it is connected to, we were given because this is not a purchase I would have ever been able to afford to make myself. So I want to make that clear before I sound super bougie. We were given a short throw projector.
Nice.
And so we've got the big screen that it came with on the wall, and then the short throw projector goes to it. But I'm actually using two first generation HomePods as the main sound system, because you are able to link those together and then make them the output with an Apple TV.
That's very cool.
And what's super cool about it is Apple actually introduced a feature a couple of generations ago, a couple of operating systems ago, that gave it the ability to serve as the audio output for anything that's connected. And so even if we're watching, or, like we've got a Wii, or no, what's it called? What's the Switch? We've got a Switch.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. I just went back into the day. And that's plugged in to the short throw projector, but because of the ARC functionality, those HomePods actually serve as the output for that as well. So it's like it's a sound bar essentially.
That's so smart too. I love
that. Super cool.
Yeah.
And it works well, surprisingly, because they're not connected to anything except over Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
And so you'd think that it'd have some delays, but they've figured it out. They've done a great job.
That's amazing.
And I'm very impressed with it. I grew up with a couple of family members who were super into the whole setup, like ran wires all over their house and and I always thought it was cool, but way too involved. And I have a significant other who's very sensitive to wires being run all over the place as well.
Like me.
Yeah. So it's kind of, and I honestly, wireless for me, I love. I don't want to have a bunch of wires running everywhere. And I also just I don't have the energy to set it up in one place and then know that there may come a time where you got to set it up again in another place. It's just, So the idea of being able to do this wirelessly, I think, is pretty cool, whether it comes from, Sonos or whatever it happens to be. But yeah, that's my setup. I don't need to have it in my own home, but I can appreciate it when it is presented to me, at the movie theater. Having some creepy sound from behind whenever you're watching something creepy is exciting and fun. And I get it and I enjoy it. Yeah. But for everyday watching, especially some of the silly reality stuff that we watch, I don't really need, somebody whispering behind my head.
Quality sound for that, for sure.
Can you imagine? It's like you could hear them whispering over in the corner about how this next game is going to go.
Exactly. Yeah. This brings me back to, I not to make this a self plug, but I got to go to Dolby last year, which was really fun, and go to their HQ, and was in a room where they had, they had Dolby Atmos.
Wait, Anthony, can you play the humble brag sound? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Do you have that ready to go?
No, wouldn't that be funny? We should know. Sorry, go ahead. This is cool.
That was so relevant. That was so needed. But it was cool because, they had the setup and it was like a living room, and they had, you're listening. Obviously I requested listening to Taylor Swift and Dolby Atmos because I had
Absolutely.
to. And the only thing I thought, two things. I thought, one, this would be really cool to have in my house, and two, I'm not a millionaire, so I probably never will. But it was a really cool experience to have that, sporadic, interaction with very cool technology that makes things sound very, true to life, which is awesome. But yeah.
I'm with you. Okay, we are going to take a little quick break, and then we're going to come back with your next story of the week. I'll take this moment to remind you all that for a limited time, we are offering a 2-week free trial of Club Twit. You can head there, twit.tv/clubtwit, to join the club. And when you do, you're going to get some pretty awesome benefits. First and foremost, you will gain access to our ad-free experience. So all of the Twit shows will be ad-free and available to you that way. You actually get your own personalized feeds for every single show. You will gain access to the Twit Plus bonus feed that has extra content you won't find other places, behind the scenes, before the show, after the show. Special Club Twit events get published there, and access to the members-only Discord server, a fun place to go to chat with your fellow Club Twit members and those of us here at Twit. You also gain access to the ad-free versions of our Club Twit shows as well. So if you want to view or listen to those shows without ads, that is how you get those. Plus, of course, that warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that you're helping support what we do here on the network. Last but not least, if you are a member of Club Twit already and you're watching this live, so you're hearing this advertisement, then know that you can go to twit.tv/clubtwit/referral. And there you can invite your friends to join the club. And when they do, for $7 a month after that 2-week free trial, they will earn you free months of Club Twit. So if you want to earn, we've set the limit pretty high. So you can, the limit does exist, but it's pretty high. So you can earn many months of Club Twit for free. twit.tv/clubtwit/referral. Alrighty. Thank you very much to our Club Twit members and to those of you considering joining the club. Let's head back to the show with our next topic. We are joined this week by Abrar Al-Heeti, and our next topic is a little bit about AI and art. Tell us all about it.
Yes. Well, I think, two words that I don't think most people thought would go together are artificial intelligence and the Beatles. So those were 4 words, but you know what I mean? Essentially, I want to talk about how the Beatles song Now and Then won a Grammy, and it is the first AI-assisted track to do so. This won the best rock performance, beat out, Pearl Jam, St. Vincent, Black Keys. So the critical thing here is, yes, it is an AI assisted track. It is not an AI generated track. These are, all the vocals are from the actual Beatles. It was essentially, AI was essentially used to clean up the track, separate John Lennon's voice from the piano that he was playing while he was recording this back in the day. The Beatles then later came back and added their own touch to this. And it has now won a Grammy. The reason this is interesting is because for the last 2 years, there have been a lot of conversations about what role, if any, AI should play when it comes to music, movies, art in general, right? And so this feels like a critical stepping stone. It feels like, okay, if an AI-assisted track is eligible for a Grammy and wins said Grammy, despite, side note, a lot of people feeling like the song wasn't that good, but that's, to each their own. It's another topic. But
yeah, that's not our conversation here.
Yeah, exactly. So, if that is now a possibility, how will these guidelines potentially change as time goes on? Because AI isn't going anywhere. It's only going to get better, and people are only going to use it more and more, right? Creatives are going to find ways to tap into it. And so you have the conversations about fears about AI, taking over people's jobs, destroying creativity. But then you also have the more nuanced conversations about people using AI for things like brainstorming, or again, like, cleaning up a track or adding some type of vocal twist to something, or, filmmakers using it in post-production to like de-age actors, for example, or remove something from a shot that shouldn't have been there. And so, this is all timely because the US Copyright Office has also now said that AI tools that are used to assist in the creative process don't undermine the copyright of that work. And that's been a really big conversation. I think a lot of, authors in particular have been very concerned about this. And I still think it's a very real issue of AI kind of pulling from work without getting permission to do so. So I think slowly but surely we're getting more guidance on, what is okay and what is not. I think the road is very, very long ahead. I think we're still going to get a lot of back and forth about what creatives want, what industry executives want, what people in the tech industry want. There's just a lot of conflicting interests here. And it's just going to be so rapidly evolving. But I'm just very curious about how art will change, how art will be recognized with AI assistance, what lines we draw, and how we erase and rewrite those lines as we go forward. But it's always fascinating to hear how different, organizations and people feel about this. I mean, I think a lot of, we saw with the Hollywood strike, a lot of artists expressing concern about AI, and then now having situations where they're able to reach some sort of consensus where, for example, SAG-AFTRA, signing a deal that allows actors to let advertisers use their voice in an ad, but they are in control of that, right? They can say, I want to make money off of this and I have control over what ads use this. I think that's really the idea, is the control, right? And being able to still benefit off of your likeness and your work, right? And so I think we're seeing more of that. We're seeing, companies like Universal Music Group partnering with AI companies like Sound Labs and Clayvision, and just finding ways to allow for AI to exist, because it's not going to go away, but making sure it's done in a way where artists benefit. And let me just add, music executives also want to benefit off of this. And they want to make sure they're getting a cut of all of this. But yeah, I think it's fascinating to see how this has evolved and will continue to evolve. But also would love to hear your thoughts about where you think this space is heading, and how you feel about kind of the increased use of AI that's undoubtedly going to happen.
Yeah. So this, of course, is like a multifaceted conversation. And I think my initial thought, as it has always been, and I'm happy that I've remained consistent on this, is that regardless of how we feel about this thing, and as you've said yourself, it is here and it is going to continue to be here, and it is going to continue to evolve and do the things that it is expected to do in a way that improves upon how it's done them thus far. I hesitate to use the word it's going to get better, only because I think that better is a subjective term. And so, for some people, it doing its job at higher quality than it does now is not better for them. But with all of that in mind, it makes me think of another thing that we see regularly, which is in grocery stores, you see different products labeling their products as non-GMO. And the push regarding genetically modified organisms and, them being good or bad. And I was recently, this is such a weird thing to say almost, but I was recently talking to a plant scientist, essentially, and someone who specifically works with plant genomes, who explained something to me that kind of blew my mind, which is that almost all of the foods that we regularly consume are not even, there's no GMO available option for those things anyway. GMOs are very specifically focused on certain oils, for example, and certain grains that are fed to animals.
Okay.
And the rules and laws that are in place don't allow for most things to have GMOs in them in the first place. And so brands that are putting that non-GMO tag on there are kind of like brands who put gluten-free on there on a product that there's no way it would have gluten on it in the first place. Yeah. And the same thing for no antibiotics used ever. The US government, as it currently stands, knock on wood, doesn't allow for antibiotics to be used in certain meats anyway. So them putting that on there is just sort of taking advantage of the fact. Yeah, like it doesn't, you're saying this, but you couldn't have done it even if you wanted to. So it's not as if there's some meat out there that has antibiotics being used because you're not allowed to use them in this.
Right.
And so, and growth hormones too is another one. So, yeah, it turns out that it's certain like canola oils that we would ever come into contact with and use. That's where seeing non-GMO would actually matter.
Interesting.
But outside of that, like produce and those different things, that's not a thing that is happening in the first place. And it's not, he said, like the big thing is even if we, we put on the cynical cap, he said, it's not financially viable to be genetically modifying a bunch of different things. So it's not within anyone's interest to do so in the first place. Yeah. So anyway, all of that's to say that there's a lot of misunderstanding about GMO. And you see people like hyping this, and it's like, even in a world where we didn't have the non-GMO label, none of those things that you're eating would have been GMO in the first place. Yeah. So that kind of blows my mind a little bit. And that's that aside. Well, sort of that as a place to look. I wonder if we're going to see the same thing where we will have a no AI used label. And does that mean that in future awards, there will be AI assisted awards and non-AI assisted awards?
Yeah. What
does that look like if there is enough of a blowback from the artists that are creating versus what, the industry might want, and the people who have a voice and a say in these things? Yeah. I'm curious about that. I wonder, if that is going to be a factor, or if we get to a place where we realize this can be used as a tool, just like, Oog takes a stone and hits it against another stone and keeps hitting it until it's sort of in the shape of a circle. Right. And then I put it on my caveman fireplace above the fire, and I look at it and I think it's great. Not great, but I go over and I make a little tool, and suddenly I've got a chisel, and now I've got a perfect circle that I've got above my fireplace. And I have, are we going to have one where if you use a tool versus if you don't use a tool, let AI be a chisel, not the full entire creator of the thing, and, let the human run the system. And I think then it's okay. But who knows? Honestly.
Absolutely. I mean, it makes me think about AI labels on social media, which I think will be beneficial, right, with AI generated content. But I was thinking about this. This is a very specific example, but it might kind of illustrate kind of the bigger picture. But I've been playing with the Galaxy S25 this week, and there's a feature called generative edit, which lets you erase things in the background that you don't necessarily like. So, filmmakers are using AI tools to erase unwanted objects from shots. You can also use this on your phone to erase unwanted things from your shots. But there's also this thing called Photoshop that has been doing that for a very long time, right?
Yes, exactly.
So AI makes it easier to do something that has been done for a very long time. And I think the word AI, I think that label carries a stigma and carries a warranted fear of what this could mean for a lot of things, a lot of works of art, right? But I think sometimes you have to take a step back and realize, like, that's a very broad category, right? AI can do a lot of things. It can do little things that help you tweak, what you're looking at and make your job easier. It can also completely create something that takes away the human element, and so there's such a broad spectrum here. So I think keeping that in mind of AI it can both help and hurt artists is basically what I mean by that. And so labels might be the way to go with some things, like posts on social media. But when I use the generative edit tool on the Galaxy phones, there is now there's a label at the bottom, a disclaimer of every photo that I tweak with generative edit. If I erase anything from it, it'll say this is AI generated content. And in my head, I'm like, that's so annoying because
yes,
because I didn't generate any. I mean, you generated a background, but you didn't generate what I captured in that photo, right? So that's just an example of how there's so much nuance. And I think not having something blatantly just be if AI touches it at all, then it's been polluted. That's not really the way to go about it, I think.
Because let me tell you something that was in a small part ruined by that nonsense is our announcement of our engagement.
I remember this.
So I posted photos of our announcement of our engagement on social media, and I used Photoshop. There was one photo where the photographer had taken it and there wasn't enough of like a vertical to be able to display it in the same way that all the rest of the photos were displayed.
Yes.
And so I extended the canvas and used the tool to add some trees up above, or extend the trees. Yeah. That's something that Photoshop's been able to do for a long time. It's not just since the AI generated tools came along, but the people in the photo were very much real people and the situation was very much real and no one's face was changed or anything like that. And I posted these photos and then afterwards saw that Instagram had tagged them as having been created with AI.
Wild.
And there were multiple people who reached out to me saying, is this real? And I was like, no, it's very real. It's true. And it's very exciting. Be excited.
Of all posts too. It's just cold.
Yeah. Of all the posts. Yes. Because I'm sure that I've posted something on Instagram before up to that point that I had used Photoshop to do, but
for sure.
Adobe had introduced that new watermarking, virtual or digital watermarking thing. And that, the thing that bothered me about it was I didn't have the ability to turn it off. Right. Instagram had, with its tools at the time, had, and I don't know what the current state of things is, but the policy was if its AI detected human beings in the photo and then detected via this digital watermark that AI was used, then it did not give you the ability to turn off that label or even just make it so that it's hidden behind a more or something like that. Yeah. It had to be displayed. So I was really annoyed by that.
So you never were able to remove that label. It's just that
no, I don't know what it looks like today, if it's still there or not, but it might be. But I very quickly put a little pinned comment that said, I promise this isn't my Canadian fiance that doesn't go to the same school as me.
Exactly.
So that was...
That's a perfect example. Exactly. So not all AI is created equal. And
All right. We're going to take another quick break before we come back with our final story of the week. And we will briefly talk about the current state of VR and AR, according to the people making the apps and games. All right, we are back for our final story of the week here on Tech News Weekly. I am joined by Abrar Al-Heeti of CNET, and this final story of the week is about kind of the current state of the developer sentiment, I guess, regarding Meta and Meta VR. So there's this incredible piece that everybody should go read from Upload VR. Called From Quest to Horizon, How Meta's Shifting Priorities Are Affecting Developers. And in it, Upload VR spoke with about 24 VR studios to talk about shipping VR games on the Quest. And it seems like there's a bit of a problem. So first and foremost, Meta's Reality Labs did report record revenue, and the Quest 3S, the model of the Quest that's a little bit more consumer focused, I guess, appears to be selling well. But despite the fact that the devices are selling well and that Meta's VR, AR group within the company is getting record revenue, the developers who are creating the experiences that make these devices sellable are struggling with declining sales and visibility in the store, the App Store. So one of the things is that the Meta Horizon app was merged with App Lab in the main store. And so kind of these different places where you could go to get your apps or look for apps all got merged together. And it's made some developers say it more difficult to find games that you would otherwise be able to find. But it seems like the biggest issue here, and I thought this was interesting, is that Meta, which originally kind of realized it needed to look out and say, please build it. If you build it, they will come, are now looking inward and focusing a lot of attention on their own, being Horizon Worlds. Horizon Worlds is, of course, the VR experience where you can go in and be part of this sort of social virtual space where people gather together and you can create your own personal space and you can build things and you can go to other people's spaces. I remember the first time I tried it out, I think it was around Halloween, and I went to somebody's space and it was like a scavenger hunt. And it was pretty cool. I was, running around and finding different pumpkins that were hidden all over the place, and there were jump scares, and the person had created that. You can create automations, and so when someone's within view of this square, then do this, and there were little mini games. And honestly, Horizon Worlds was a pretty cool concept. Have I been back? No. But there's been a lot of focus on Horizon Worlds, and given that, it seems to be at the expense of those traditional VR games. So with Meta putting its focus there, then the teams that are in charge of finding and surfacing new games and experiences aren't as focused on that. The editorial team seem to be more focused on Horizon Worlds, and it has resulted also in the introduction of many more free-to-play experiences, which we all, despite the fact that it seems to work on our psychology, we all know are garbage. And those, of course, compete with the fully paid apps. According to the report, developers have reported sales drops of 50 to 80% in 2024 compared to 2023. And that's despite the launch of the Quest 3S, where things seem to be selling well, but not to the level that they were expecting. And with those lower quality apps kind of overtaking things, and more importantly, the free clones of popular paid apps being an issue, it's really hard for these developers to compete. One other thing is a kind of mixed reaction of an introduction to the App Store, which is Quest's App Store, which is the Quest Plus subscription. Certain developers can become part of Quest Plus, and you pay a monthly subscription, and then you get access to the different games and experiences that are part of Quest Plus. Well, some feel like that has helped because it means consistent revenue, but others say that those subscription services impact direct sales, as you might expect, which again makes it hard for those games to compete. Last but not least, I'll say this, which is that developers are finding it more profitable to sell on other platforms like Steam and on PlayStation VR, where they're ending up making more money or selling more copies. And then one one developer reported that the non-VR version of its game outsold the VR version of its game by 500%. So some are just finding that going into VR is not worth it. So there's a lot that's kind of at work here that seems to make it the case that Meta itself is focused a lot on its own thing, even though developers were part of the reason why the Quest found a footing in the first place. And also, I think it's something that we heard as a common refrain when we talked about the Apple Vision Pro headset was that, yeah, it's got great graphics and this and that and the other, but it doesn't have the robust app platform that you get with the Quest. And it's kind of shocking and unfortunate that Meta is not putting more respect toward its developers, because I think also about the iPhone and how the iPhone would not be the success that it is today if it weren't for the developers making thousands upon thousands upon thousands of apps that people enjoy and want to use. So now I'll ask you, Abrar, what's your experience with VR? Have you used Horizon Worlds, and kind of what are your thoughts about what Meta is doing? Does it make sense for the company to just kind of focus on its own thing here, or what do you think?
I'm going to paint a picture for you for how inexperienced I am in VR and gaming. My first time using a VR headset was, I think it was either probably around 2014 or something, when I was an undergrad and I was like writing an article for our school paper, and it was Oculus back in the day. And I got to try it out, and it was very novel at that point, right? It was a very, very cool experience. It was like with researchers that I got to like put it on, because it was some sort of, it was related to the engineering department. They had some sort of simulation in there for students, which was very cool. And then fast forward to when I joined CNET in 2017, we had one of my colleagues had me try on a Batman VR game, which I don't know the name of. I know nothing about it. I don't remember anything except for it was very cool, and it was in 2017. So that was very fun. And since then, I have not put on a VR headset, and I think it's mostly because I'm not a gamer. And I think if I were a gamer, though, VR would be a very cool way to experience that. But there's been no reason for me otherwise to invest in my own headset, whether it's Quest or definitely not the Apple Vision Pro. I will tell you that. But it's interesting to hear about this, and it's interesting to see how this is evolving. I've never used Horizon Worlds, but it is fascinating. I think the most interesting point that you brought up was developers talking about standard versions of their game being more popular than VR versions.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference for whether you play in VR or regular, or does it just kind of depend on what you're feeling?
So I'm not big on VR.
Yeah.
Many of the gaming experiences make me physically ill.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's always going to keep me out of
Yeah.
VR. I've got a Quest 2, 3, one of those. Look, I don't even know. And I found some of the experiences, as I said, kind of novel and fun for a little bit of time, but nothing ever keeps me coming back. I just don't, I'm not, it's not compelling enough to put me through the experiences that I've had with them. So I'm not big on gaming also. So it really has to be a standout thing for me to want to play it. Yeah. And if I want to play it, I'm typically going to want to play it in meat space, not in VR space.
Yeah, absolutely.
That said, it's kind of odd because I think that Horizon Worlds is the kind of thing that like it almost boggles my mind that I'm not more enamored of Horizon Worlds, given what it is and how it works. I like that sort of build and create and automate and share kind of experience, but maybe it's that it's in VR. And that's actually what one of the internal teams said at like within Meta was reported to have said, if we don't bring this to mobile, Horizon Worlds is not going to take off as it should. it needs to not just be a VR experience. And I thought that was kind of interesting. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like that really illustrates Meta being kind of stuck in between what they dreamed of and what people actually want. I mean, I think that whole pivot to the metaverse and this idea that we'd all be donning headsets and interacting in a virtual space that didn't quite materialize maybe has some thinking, what do we actually need to develop? And when people do like being in the real world a little bit and just having a screen held up, like, in front of their face. Yeah, it's an interesting reflection of where they're at right now.
Absolutely. So I do want to, again, encourage everyone to go check out the piece from Upload VR. It's a really in-depth piece. There's YouTube videos included, lots of information cited, some of the direct quotations from the developers themselves, and kind of the current state of things as far as that goes. I wonder if it was Batman Arkham Shadow that you played, or one of those Batman Arkham games, but you're like, maybe could have been. Not?
Let's say it.
Sure, that's one. That definitely reminded me of that. So yeah, I don't know. I feel for these developers, in every sense of the word, in every sense of the situation, you have this expectation of how you're going to be treated. And so many times they're reminded of the fact that they aren't as important to the company as the company's bottom line. And that's so frustrating. And especially if arguably you are responsible for any level of success that the product has.
Yes.
So we will, continue to watch that as well and see what VR and AR looks like going forward. And, I think there's competition even amongst those two, right? Mm-hmm. Developing an experience for VR is vastly different in most cases from developing an AR experience. Yeah. And there's a lot of attention being paid to AR right now. And I think that kind of further breaks things apart and messes with the focus and the attention as well. And dilution is what I was looking for. It dilutes everything. And that isn't great for these company or these developers that are trying to, skate to where the puck will be. Yep. Yeah. Yep. All right. That is going to bring us to the end of this episode of Tech News Weekly. Our show publishes every Thursday at twit.tv/TNW. That is where you can go to subscribe to the show in various formats, and it's audio and video formats. And I would love to know, Abrar, Al-Heeti, if people want to follow you online and check out all the great work you're doing, where should they go to do so?
Yes, you can find my work at CNET.com. I'm also on Instagram, Abrar Al-Heeti. I'm also on X, Abrar, or that's not my username. My username on X is Al-Heeti_3. I decided to mix things up a little bit. Why keep it consistent? And I'm also, I always say this, I'm on TikTok, but it's never anything related to my work. But if you want to have some fun, come join me over there, Abrar Al-Heeti.
Beautiful. What's the 3?
Because I'm the third sibling. So I picked that just to make it easier. And then apparently I had to have the underscore because somebody took it without one, but I've never found them.
Oh.
I don't know who that is, but I'd really, I have some.
Yeah, if you're out there, let's talk.
It was for real. But yeah.
If you'd like to follow me online, I am at Mikah Sargent on many a social media network, or you can head to chihuahua.coffee. That's CHIHUA.coffee, where I've got links to the places I'm most active online. Be sure to check out my other shows, including Hands on Tech, Hands on Mac, iOS Today. I was like, I know I'm forgetting one. And I'll be back next week with another episode of Tech News Weekly. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.
Business leaders need clear insights into both the Apple and Microsoft ecosystems to stay competitive. That's why we provide expert-led coverage on both. With Twit's Mac Break Weekly, iOS Today, and Hands on Mac, you'll get the latest Apple updates, productivity tips, and innovation insights. Meanwhile, our Windows Weekly and Hands on Windows shows deliver the newest developments on Windows, Xbox, and more. Tune into Security Now for essential cybersecurity strategies for both companies. Gain comprehensive tech insights across platforms at twit.tv, and always stay ahead of the curve.